gathering was also sponsored by the Indigenous Peoples Coalition, and I'm Albert Bender. I'm the chairperson of that coalition. And Melba's remarks remind me when you were asked about chiefs in Tennessee or Dallas, Texas. I had a rather humorous experience a while back with a non-Indian couple, an elderly white couple. I was coming out of the bank, and the elderly white man says to me, "You're an Indian." I said, "Well, yeah." And he said, "How long have you been in Tennessee?" I said, "Oh, about 14,000 years. So then the elderly white woman looks at me and says, "How old are you?" I said, "She couldn't be thinking that. I've been living here for 14,000 years as a person." But there are a lot of misconceptions that people have about Native people, and a lot of historical aspects that need to be addressed, that will someday perhaps be addressed. And I'd like to mention in particular, in reference to the Treaty of Fort Jackson that Melba referred to, where the Creeks gave up 23 million acres of land, or were forced to give up 23 million acres of land. The war, that was part of the War of 1812. The War of 1812 ended with a treaty between the so-called United States and Great Britain at that time. And according to the Treaty of Ghent of 1812, Article 9 of that treaty, no Indian nation or people who had fought against the United States in the War of 1812 was supposed to lose any land to the newly formed United States, which means, in effect, and I'll speak as an attorney also, in effect, that the Creek Nation, Muscogee Creek Nation, is still entitled to and are still legal owners of that 23 million acres that was signed away at the Treaty of Fort Jackson. And treaty breaking and treaty stipulation and the like has a life of its own that lives forever. And that is something that could be looked into, and I think would be a very credible lawsuit against the United States government and the states of Georgia and Alabama. I would like to open it up now for anyone who wants to say anything further or make any further remarks in reference to this gathering. You'd certainly be welcome.
I'd like to I want to thank everybody for being here today. Come in a good way, come in a respectful way, a dignified way. We as a vigil here, as a prayer, one mind, and we pray through these ways, these sacred ways, the center of the universe.
I'm Larry. I'm thankful for being here. I'm a descendant of slaves from the Middle Tennessee area. My great-granny, she was a maid where Andrew Jackson used to stay at the Alexander Inn in Belfast. And he traveled Noblesville Road, crossed the Duck River, and went through Farmerton, the Turnpike, and went to Belfast where he stayed. And he picked up troops as he went to defeat the Creeks in Alabama. And she died, the last slave in my family died in 1937, and the stories that I was told, my oral history, there's nowhere in the world I would take part in celebrating nobody that was for slavery. And it's awful. That's all I got to say.
would like to say a couple of words, please. I'm a Cherokee Nation citizen, born and raised in Oklahoma. I'm a descendant of Nanyehi Nancy Ward, beloved woman of the Cherokee. And Melvin, I discovered that I believe that your Creek ancestor was on the same detachment as mine, the Richard Taylor detachment. Did we discuss that? But my great-great-uncle was Richard Taylor. He was the conductor of the 11th Detachment. The wagon master on that detachment was my great-great-grandfather, Samuel Parks, and my grandmother was the first generation born in Indian Territory in my descendancy from Nancy Ward. And I'm very grateful to be here. I'm so grateful to Albert for being such a great leader and well-spoken and representing us. And just honored to be a part of everyone who's here. Why don't
I would like to say a few more remarks in reference to the Indian boarding school situation, which is an ongoing situation of a part of the genocide committed against Native people in the United States by the U.S. government. It's estimated that now over 40,000 young Indian children perished in the boarding schools of the United States, which is a huge, huge number and is indicative of the genocide that took place against Native people from the late 19th century to the middle 20th century in the boarding school situation. And to me, these young children should indeed be lionized as heroes, because they left their tribes as Indians, went to the boarding schools, and for those of them who survived, they returned to their tribes as Indians. The boarding schools did not break them. It did not de-Indianize them. It did not assimilate them. And I have a story from my family. One of my great-great-grandmothers, or great-grandmother, worked in boarding schools in Oklahoma, and because in some of the boarding schools there were Native employees, and these boarding schools were not as severe as the boarding schools where you had all non-Native personnel. And this great-grandmother passed the story down that one of the means of resistance of young Indian males in the boarding school situation where she worked was that they cut the seats out of the bottoms of their pants and put on breechcloths as a means of letting the school know that they were defiant and were not going to be assimilated into the non-Indian culture. And again, the boarding school situation is further being investigated, and there needs to be some type of reparation. There needs to be some type of justice rendered, because I'm sure that there are boarding school personnel from the 20th century or the mid-20th century that are still alive. And the more I read about the boarding school injustice and travesty, the more I am shocked. I saw on YouTube just a few weeks ago, this was an investigation of a boarding school in Canada, where that the white personnel fashioned an electric chair. An electric chair, can you believe this? And for students who broke the rules, they were seated and manacled and held down in the electric chair and given electric shocks. That is just beyond my comprehension. You had criminals in charge of these boarding schools. And in the same boarding school, young Indian children who violated the rules were made to literally eat vomit off the floor. That is just something that is beyond my comprehension. But these are crimes that must be addressed and must be recompensed. I might not see it in my lifetime, but these are some of the many battles that we are fighting for justice. And if no one else has anything else to say, I would like for us to stand at the curb there, and those of us who are interested in taking signs, if you will, and stand in silent protest, because the mayor of Nashville, Mayor Cooper, and the governor, Governor Lee, they are right now giving their inaugural address. And that's why this demonstration how this demonstration came about. Representative Justin Jones gave me a call a couple of weeks ago, and he said, Albert, he said, there's going to be a birthday anniversary celebration of Andrew Jackson, 256th birthday celebration. And he said, I thought that you and the rest of the indigenous community should know about to consider coming out for a demonstration. So after he told me that, I felt that, we have to do this. And Melba will tell you that myself, her, and others, prior to the pandemic, we had a series of demonstrations over the years against the Hermitage, and communication with some I forget his name, Keitel or something?
Harold, I forgot his last name.
Yeah, I think it was Keitel.
Mr. Harold.
Yeah, Mr. Harold. In reference to the presentations that they have in there in reference to Jackson's Indian policy. And that's something that we need to follow up on, and we will follow up on. But in the meantime, if those of you who will, we could stand out front here. And I'm really surprised that there are not more people here.